Hello, and welcome to Seriously Conversations About Culture, the podcast where myself and a few of my friends get together and discuss nerdy things. Just a reminder, if you like what you're listening to, please subscribe to Seriously Pointless Conversations YouTube channel, or you can find us on your favorite podcasting apps. Thank you for your support. Without you, none of this would be possible. Thanks for coming by. Now let's get into the episode. Hi, and welcome to Seriously Pointless Conversations About Culture, the podcast that brings you your weekly nerdy and gaming information. We're not really a news show, are we? We're just kind of like a show that just likes to talk about random crud, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, we're last decade's news. It's good.
Hey, that's what we're going for. Talking about last decades. Today's episode, it might end up being a two-parter. We'll see here in a minute because we have a prolific amount of information to go through today. It's over Red Alert, the amazing Westwood gaming series, the historic RTS that brought a lot of things into the forefront of PC gaming especially. So before we get into it, let's go over a little bit about where you first encountered Red Alert. You want to go first, James?
Sure. I actually first encountered Red Alert, and this is going to be seriously nerdy. My Uncle John was upgrading one of the local Catholic schools' internet services. Mm-hmm. And so after we spent the entire day rewiring their network,
you're good, keep going.
We of course sat down to have a LAN party in their computer lab, because back in the day that was the only place you would have like 30 computers in one place. Yeah. So we installed bootleg copies of Red Alert 2 on every single computer in that lab.
You young kids, we're boomers definitely at this point.
And we played some like 8 and 10 person multiplayer. That was my first experience with that game.
Dude, so it's funny you kind of bring that up. So that's where I remember you guys, I think I was there with you guys at one point. I think I saw you guys playing it, but I was just like, I don't know, what is that? And it's kind of weird looking. But I vividly remember... So I vividly remember whenever the Command & Conquer series came out, that we were over at Chris's house.
Yeah, Chris Sire and I used to play because they had the 2 computers there.
Yeah, and he burnt me a copy of it. And I remember you guys had it on... Because I remember seeing it when you guys playing with it, not really thinking about it, but I remember he burnt me a copy. But I remember that he had the label burnt onto it. Remember the image of the GSI on it?
Yes.
So I remember him burning that for me, and he also had one for the Nod scenarios, because at the point, back then, guys, it was, I mean, we're dating ourselves a little bit, but things weren't on thumb drives, and a lot of times you had like multiple CDs you had to play and things like that, and so you had 2 different CDs for both of the campaigns. And I was like, I remember seeing that, and I'm like, it was like the holy grail. And I was just like, I played that thing to death.
You really did. I mean, we just kind of sat around and killed each other, but you like played through all the scenarios and everything.
I remember so much so, actually, I loved it so much so, actually, they had, we'll get into this a little bit, they actually released a remastered version, which I actually picked up last week.
Oh, really?
And it holds up, dude. I had no idea how amazing it was, but we'll get into that a little bit more, but... we're actually going to be focusing directly on the Command & Conquer series today. We're going to be dealing with its kind of offshoot a little bit. I don't know, it's kind of a little of a muddled history, but I'll go into it a little bit. It's the Red Alert series, which is by Westwood Studios. It's a real-time strategy game developed in November of 1996. And it's actually considered a prequel to the Command & Conquer series, which came out the year before. So in the Command & Conquer series, you have just GSI, the Global Strategic Initiative, which is essentially like the Allied.
Yeah.
But then you have the Brotherhood of Nod, which is kind of like the bad guys essentially, or the World Domination Group. In this one, it's an alternative history where the Allied, you basically have the setup of Allied forces and Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union has not like fallen down at all. It's actually bolstered, and it's actually kind of advanced a little bit more in this alternate history. And they actually try to come in, and they try to basically take over mainland Europe. So that's kind of the basic premise of it. It's just a kind of a generic alternate history, but then do you remember like the weird things they throw into the first one?
It has some weird stuff, like there's time travel involved, and it's
Oh yeah, so like that's a big thing that we're gonna like.
it's kind of weird because they have these really thematic, awesome. Both armies are just the sprites are really really amazing in that they have really really clear
Yeah.
stylized imagery, and then
And you can clearly tell, like, yeah, which faction is which.
you can, and a lot of it is period type stuff where the Soviets have their big honking tanks.
Yeah, they're double barrel tanks. They're like mammoth looking things, and then you have the Allied tanks are a little smaller, but they're a little
smaller, a
faster.
little bit faster, and then you have some weird stuff thrown in, like time traveling soldiers and giant Tesla coils that zap your enemies.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's just a little like, oh, what's going on here?
Like this is a little strange, and you can we'll go into it obviously as we go on with the other games, but you can tell that throughout the whole series, like Red Alert 1, 2, and 3, they just crank it up to like 11 by the third one. And they have some bizarre units and some bizarre technologies in there, and you're thinking, you can tell like why they kind of like, they're like, we're gonna dip our toe into this a little bit, see how people like. We're not gonna go so crazy, because Tesla coils are plausible.
Yeah.
You can use it. I don't know if it'll kill somebody, but I mean it can in a weird way. If you depending on stuff, the science could be there, but it's not like outside the realm. The weirdest thing was the time travel stuff.
Yeah.
So.
But it had a really, really well-developed story, especially for an RTS game, because a lot of those
yeah.
back in the day were just a series of missions. They didn't have like.
Well, do you remember playing Warcraft, Orcs and Humans?
Yeah.
So it literally came out the same year as the Command and Conquer series, and it really didn't have a storyline. I mean, it was basically just, if you're the orcs, take over the humans. If you're the humans, take over the orcs. And
Exactly.
I don't even know if it had a campaign at all or not. But
I'm not sure if the first one did. I know
the second one did.
The second one did. That was big.
That was where they kind of pushed off. That's where Blizzard kind of like pushed into their stuff. But I was really just amazed the kind of dedication and the detail that they put into this. But before we start going into it, we want to kind of make sure we hit all of our points here. The Red Alert series was originally released for the PC, which was Mac, DOS, and Windows 95. That shows how old we are. Just like I said, we're dating ourselves immensely here, but it was so well received that it was actually eventually ported over to the PlayStation, the PSP, and the PS3. As far as I know,
PS3 really?
Yeah, which
wow.
is I didn't think, I was like that's a
that was like a decade and a half old by the time PS3 came
at that point.
Yeah.
But I guess it was just so well loved that people liked it. And as far as I know, I couldn't find anything online that showed that it was actually ported over to like the Xbox or any other systems. As far as I could tell, it was strictly just released for the PlayStation. As far as I could tell, which is kind of a strange thing. You would think
it's strange, yeah.
You would kind of think that Windows would have like allowed them to put that on their Xbox, but maybe it just wasn't compatible. Back then, things were really weird, guys. It's not like it is today.
By PlayStation 3, most of the things were releasing on all the different systems. Like, because PlayStation 1 and 2, and like the original Xbox, yeah, they were all exclusive stuff, but...
Yeah, and I mean, that's just kind of one of those things. It's like you never thought that maybe, like I said, maybe it just wasn't compatible. That's the only thing I could think of. Like, it just, maybe the hardware wasn't, meshing with it or whatever it was. I don't know for sure.
I don't know. It took them a long time to figure out how to do RTS games on a controller, and I still greatly prefer the mouse interface for RTSs, so...
Like I said,
they just thought it wasn't worth the effort.
No, absolutely. I'm 100% there. Like, I remember some of the guys, they'll play even turn-based strategies. I can't do it. It's kind of like with like Civilization. They ported the newest one over to the Switch, and a couple of the guys who work, they got it, and I'm just like, I tried playing it, and it's just not the same. It doesn't have the same amount of details, like with information or even just the graphic wise. It's just res down, and it's just a preference. Maybe I'm just an old fogey.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a very click-intensive game, and I just don't see how you can keep the same pace going with that interface. But anyway,
you really can't. But anyways, so after it was released in '96, it actually had technically 3 expansions for it, which why it was so well received because they added. This is like before they really started putting out expansion packs for PC games because a lot of times they would just throw in the whole game, whole ham hock. That's what you get by one CD or one game at a time, and it would have all the information, all of it right there. But they started releasing more and more expansions, which added more units, more campaign maps, and additional little storylines and things like that. So they released Counter Strike and the Aftermath in '98, which I remember Aftermath and the Counter Strike expansions because I actually got those from you guys. I borrowed those from you guys.
Yes, I remember that.
So, but they also released Retaliations later that year in '98. I don't remember that one at all.
I didn't remember the 3rd expansion either. I must have missed that one.
And like I said, it's one of those things. Just like being kids, a lot of what we got was from handed down to us from like older like adults, your dad or your uncle, people like that.
Exactly.
Or my uncle.
I think we might have been into Diablo 2 at that point.
Maybe we might have been at that point. That's
time.
A whole another episode we can get into, and we can show that love there. But anyways, so after Westwood Studios was around for quite a bit of time, putting out updates and trying to push this, but obviously their biggest thing that they're known for was the Red Alert and the Command & Conquer series. But seeing as they didn't have as many hits after the Red Alert series and the Command & Conquer series, they were actually acquired by Electric Arts in 2008, which everybody knows Electric Arts. They're just a giant conglomerate that buys up smaller studios at this point.
This was back when they weren't, the devil incarnate, though.
Yeah, this is true. This is very true. And so
they actually put out a lot of good games back in the day.
Oh, absolutely, man. And but they actually talking about that, they really released a remastered version of just the Red Alert series. I believe it was just Red Alert 1 in November 2018. So the cool thing about this, I was looking it up. They have all the original cutscenes that you were talking about, and so if you guys haven't played this before, this was just something that was unheard of. A lot of times they would do like maybe some short CGI'd cutscene where it's like really clunky movements, but they did live action cutscenes in between each of the missions.
Which was, like you said, totally unheard of. I mean, everyone was just doing like, it wasn't even like a pre-recorded cutscene. It was like the in-game models just with scripted movements.
Exactly.
And these were, like you said, full video motion. They had full sets. I mean, it was like a real production.
Yeah, real actors, and they were actually using green screen. It's not blue screen. It was green screen still at the time, and they were using sets, and they were actually using. I was looking this up. Did you know they actually used? They only hired 1 or 2 actors for the entire thing. Everyone else that's in those cutscenes, those are Westward employees. Every single one of them. And so they're walking, you're like typing out some code, you're like, typing away, and they're like, hey, Frank, you're going to be in the movie today. He's just like, okay.
So here, go down and get a costume.
Yeah, really. And you're just like, what? That is amazing. So just like their one moment of glory, like you look them up on IMDb, and that's their one credit.
They have one appearance.
Frank the coder. He's at Red Alert, scene 5, or wherever it was. But yeah, that was one of the cool things because that's how you can tell that they put a lot of love in these things. Is they were like they actually just literally were like they got guys because they didn't have it in the budget to put these people to hire real actors except for one guy, which we'll get into a little bit. You remember, Kane from the
Yes.
He's one of the only ones that I could tell that was an actually paid actor, and you can tell whenever you watch. If you get bored sometime, you guys watch any of the scenes, he is so into. Like you can tell he's putting emotion into these lines.
It was intense.
And I really enjoyed it. He's actually like in the background in a lot of the scenes in the Soviet stuff. So that's kind of where that's why they say this is a prequel to the Command & Conquer series.
Exactly. He gets more prominent as kind of the series goes on.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, but you can kind of tell that like after this one, they make a distinct impression saying in a lot of interviews, Westwood, that the two series, the Command & Conquer series and the Red Alert series, diverge from the original Red Alert game. And you have a Command & Conquer series, which is like Tiberium Wars, things like that. And then Red Alert 2 and 3 are their own games. And there are two different histories, essentially. It's what they kind of try to put in there.
And the gameplay is actually pretty different on the two series too.
Oh, absolutely.
Surprisingly,
And
coming from the same company.
You know, speaking of that, actually, so Command and Conquer, they did a lot of really interesting techniques in here, which a lot of people consider pioneering for a lot of the RTSs. So in the game, just kind of going a brief over kind of what the gameplay is. You use harvesters to mine ore, which essentially is just money. And use this money to build up your bases and your units. This is basic RTS strategy and gameplay stuffs here. But where it kind of like diverges a little bit, they actually have distinct. Westwood actually made it to where the buildings and the units have distinct differences in costs and strengths depending on which faction you choose. So if you get the Allies, or actually we'll go with the Soviets first. If you have the Soviets, you have stronger and more durable units, buildings, but they cost a lot more money and power, which I don't remember seeing that whenever I was younger. But then again, how it is with details. When you're a kid, you just kind of like it washes over. And you're just like, oh, these guys are obviously stronger.
I remember loving the big tanks and
the Tesla coils.
And the Tesla
because
coils.
every time, or the flamethrower things, and every time one infantry guy would get close and go, oh,
exactly.
One hit, one kill for infantry units. It was just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is also about the Soviets is their naval capabilities were much more limited than the Allied forces. So you have that trade-off. Mm-hmm. So you'll see that trade-off. So whenever you'd get, depending on what type of map you would get, if it was just straight land, no ocean, you obviously wanted to make sure, and you could tell ahead of time because whenever you went the scene select or the map selection, you could pick which one you want depending on what faction you used. Obviously, if you're going to be on the land all the time, you just want to be straight Soviets. And knowing that, you could do a lot of things such as like the Soviet tank rush, which was a huge, very popular tactic during like multiplayer scene. Because at this time, they did a lot of land like tournaments and things like that, which is like I guess you would call a precursor to StarCraft, which is what Blizzard came out with. I don't even know how many years later, because when was StarCraft? Probably closer to 2000-ish, maybe?
Yeah, it was a couple of years later.
Yeah, I know that, and then that's when...
I want to say StarCraft was like Red Alert 2 era. It was a little bit later.
It was just a little bit later, and you could tell that's when the RTS competitive scene really blew up, especially like over in Korea and places like that. It's huge now. Like, it's...
Oh, yeah.
It's ridiculous. Not so much here in the U.S. We do a lot more, like, shooters and things like that here, but it is enormous over there. I had no idea until I started trying to play online, and I couldn't get a match with anybody from America. I remember I was playing the newer StarCraft, and I couldn't get a match with anybody. I was always getting paired with Koreans, and they were just kicking my butt over and over again. And finally, I was just like, I'm done with multiplayer.
People are obsessed with StarCraft,
which is great.
Yeah, no, there was in college the professor taught a course called the Calculus of StarCraft. It was an entire college course about mathematically determining the best strategies for StarCraft.
That's great. My hat comes off to him. That's amazing. And you were paying attention though the whole time. You're just like, wow, this is, as opposed to like, we're gonna throw some numbers on the board and just go, there they are. Here, nerds, pay attention. StarCraft, and every one of you guys were like this, except for that one guy in the back that was never into computer games or whatever. Like, I don't know how, but whatever.
Yeah.
Anyways, so, but kind of going off the different things that they threw in there, the Westwood actually put in something that I hadn't really seen before, which was superpowers, which you actually, so if you were the Soviets, you would build the Iron Curtain, which is superpower, which basically it temporarily made any of your units invulnerable to hit for a very short period of time to any damage. So the weird thing I saw about that, though, if I remember correctly, if you put it on if you were being attacked at the time and the enemy had infantry units, it would actually kill them. So I remember I tried this the other week when I was playing on it, and it straight up just kills the infantry units on the other team. But it keeps yours alive for some weird reason. I never got that.
Yeah, I don't think I noticed that back in the day.
I tried it. I kind of like, I had a vague memory of that at one point, and I was just like, what? Like, Like, that can't be right, and they couldn't do that. But no, it still works.
It
And I was
straight
just
up
like,
kills 'em.
I'm like, this is great. So if you're getting bum rushed by the Allied forces, and they can just crank out infantry guys like super fast, it's a great way to like just smoke them real fast and get rid of that push they're trying to go for.
Because their infantry is a lot better than the Soviet ones. If I
They
remember
do,
right.
yeah, they do have. So if you're Soviets, you have a lot of you'll just have the basic infantrymen, and you'll have I believe they're grenadiers. I think that's what they have.
Yeah.
And so you have a lobbing motion. If you have, and so it's a little bit more of an AOE. If you're allied, you still have the infantry units, but you have bazookas.
Yeah.
And so they actually do a lot more damage to tanks than the grenadiers do, and they're more direct. But they do like almost no damage to infantry units if you're a bazooka man.
And
So
did you have the guard dogs in Red Alert 1, or was that 2?
Yeah, you have them in Red Alert
Yeah,
1.
because I remember building a bunch of the guard dogs because they were good at taking out the infantry.
Yeah, I don't remember if the Soviets had them or you both. I think you both had them.
I think both had them.
I can't remember. I'd have to look that up. But talking about that, the Allied differences between the Soviets and Allies, Allied forces units. The Allies, obviously, like I said earlier, were much cheaper in regards to money and power, but they were substantially weaker than the Soviets. But where they really shined, and I don't know if you remember this or not, they're the naval units. Do you remember the cruiser, the enormous thing that it's the biggest boat that you can make on there, and you can literally shoot across the map to like kill things?
It was ridiculous.
So if there was do you remember there was any body of water and you could build a base, you would build, or a naval construction yard, you would build that. And you would build as many cruisers as you could, and you would just rain hell down on the Soviets because that was your ultimate winning strategy at that point.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't need anything else.
You really didn't, because you didn't have a lot of air support and things like that. But man, if you did that, it was like surface to surface, nothing could beat it. It was just amazing to watch. But the Allied actually had the really interesting superpower. Unlike the, I guess you would call the Soviet superpower somewhat interesting, but it was more of just like an invulnerability thing. The Allied, they kind of went off the premise like they do like they showed in the cutscenes. They with the time travel and things like that. They did Chronosphere, which was more of a teleportation device, is more of what it was. So that was a really cool mechanic.
It was.
And it didn't matter. I remember it showing that it didn't matter if you had even. I guess the word I'm looking for, if you hadn't discovered the portion of the map yet.
No, you just picked a spot.
You just picked a spot, and sometimes I remember if you did it, you could actually kill your unit sometimes, depending on where you put it at, and you could actually but a lot of times.
Yeah, if you teleport a tank into the water, it just dies.
It just dies. I remember that, but I remember a lot of times you could literally just say, "I'm on this corner of the map." They're obviously on the opposite corner of the map because that's just that's what they did in those games. I don't know why. It was just really basic.
You always started on the opposite side.
Absolutely. But you can tell they actually did some really interesting things though later on, especially in the multiplayer. So you know how even if the Allied forces and the Soviets had their differences to begin with, they actually kind of even made it a little bit more individualistic with the countries, depending on whenever you played multiplayer. So if you were like Germany, you would have greater firepower, and if you were England, you had better durability. France, faster fire rate. Russia had lower costs on their units, and Ukraine had faster movement speed. So if you're playing in the multiplayer, it even diverged a little more. Yeah. So if you could imagine, can you imagine if they had today's resources and they could build this game, how much further they could make and how much more diverse they could make it?
I'd love to play it. It'd be great.
I mean, it's kind of like if you're gonna play Overwatch nowadays. You have so many different types of tanks to choose from.
Yeah.
I'm you can literally be the melee wall character Reinhardt, or you can be the turret. Who's the? She's an android. She's the turret one, but she can throw up a shield. Arisa, that's who it was. But I mean, you can literally. There's so many different variations on it. They kind of take that variety. I guess they take that ideal of variety is the spice of life, essentially.
And this was kind of the beginning of that, because before this, I mean, because I want to say what Total War might have had 2 factions, I think.
Oh Lord, I don't even remember playing Total War.
Yeah.
That's been I think the first one that I ever played was, I think it was Rome Total War.
Yeah.
I don't remember where that one came out though.
Yeah, and that was a different one. I'm trying to think of something else. It's an older one. It's kind of the same era as Red Alert.
It might have been because
Yeah.
I did play. I was not as into RTSs as you guys were initially.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of had to play catch up a little bit, and at that point in my life, I did not have access to as I guess you would call the niceties of a good computer.
It took us a while to convince your parents that they needed one.
And then I remember at one point I literally just went out and bought a graphics card and just shoved it in that HP that my mom and dad had.
Oh gosh.
And I remember doing that, and you're like, yeah, it'll work. We were like 7th to 8th grade or something like that.
Yeah.
Because I remember that's the first time I'd ever put a new component in a computer, and I remember you telling me, it's fine, I did it. But Dad's like, what the hell did you do to this? And I'm just like, it works better, and it's just like, just bogging it down, because it's like, what did you do to me? It's just like dying. But it was.
I think the motherboard didn't support it in the
Probably
end or
not.
something.
Or who knows? But I was like, this will work. I just remember doing that because you're like, it'll be fine. Because you wanted me to play all these games with you, and I just remember Mom and Dad ended up getting a new computer. That helped me out a lot. So. Anyways, talking about stories, so we're gonna go over a brief synopsis. Well, maybe not a brief synopsis of the plot of the whole thing. So bear with me for a little bit, guys. So Red Alert, like I said earlier, takes place in a parallel universe. So the whole premise is at the Trinity site in New Mexico, which is where they dropped the A-bomb in 1946. Albert Einstein prepares to travel backward in space-time, which is how we were talking about the time travel a little bit. He activates his experimental time machine to find himself in Landsberg, Germany on December 20th, 1924, where he meets a young Adolf Hitler just after the latter's release from Landsberg prison, which is where he actually wrote Mein Kampf.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where he solidifies his role, or what he's going to do within the Socialist Party. So following a brief conversation between the two, Einstein shakes Hitler's hand, which erases him from the timeline. I don't know how that works. If you could just like go back in time and just like shake somebody's hand, they disappear. That would be super like bad. I'm like awful in my opinion.
Yeah, and kind of the ethical implications are a little, I don't know, you kind of get in the butterfly effect question.
Yeah, I'm like, what do you do instead of going to bother Hitler? You go to Stalin and you're like, he's a baby, and you like wiggle his hand and he poof disappears.
Well, and that's the thing though, I mean, because you think about history, I mean, yeah, Hitler was an influential figure, but he stepped into the space that was there.
Absolutely.
It's like if you could hypothetically get rid of him, would it really change that much?
No, I'm like,
I mean, we can't know the answer to this, but you kind of wonder.
No, in my opinion, somebody else would have stepped up and taken over his spot, and it could have been better for us, or it could have been worse. And there's no telling. That's why they're all hypotheticals, unfortunately.
Exactly. I think and now we're getting way off topic, but
I know, yeah.
I feel like in history we like to talk about great people and great persons.
That zeitgeist kind of
exactly, and it makes for great stories, but you kind of wonder really. How much is just circumstance and people stepping into the space that's available for them? Is it and how much it really is down to the individual drive and spark?
Exactly. So that's a huge topic that philosophers have been talking about for years.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not even gonna try and run into that because I for one am a working class individual. I'm not that smart, and I'm not gonna try. So, but anyway. So after Einstein basically makes Hitler vanish from his existence, Hitler's death actually prevents him from rising to power as a leader of the Nazi Germany, which creates a new timeline. Without Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union grows powerful under the rule of Joseph Stalin. The USSR seizes land from China, then invades Eastern Europe to achieve Joseph Stalin's vision of a Soviet Union stretching across the entire Eurasian landmass. In the response, the countries of Europe, including an already rearmed Germany, form the Allied nations and start a guerrilla war against the invading Soviet army. Over the course of the game's story, the Allies and the Soviets fight for control over the European mainland in an alternate World War II. So, like you said, it's kind of one of those things. It's like, sure, did they prevent World War II? No, they kind of just, and according to this, they just kind of like
So it's like, so Germany's not going to be that wall between, Eastern
yeah,
Europe and the Russians,
yeah.
and so now they have to fight each other directly.
Which is essentially what the Cold War was. It was just
Essentially, yeah.
it was like you said, it was a Cold War, but it was just pushed off a little bit for a few years because we had World War II that occurred, and we had to have the Axis powers fighting the Allied powers instead of the Allied powers fighting the USSR powers.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what you're talking about a little bit, and it's just like you said, did it really change anything? Is it different? A little bit, but anyway, so the interesting thing that they actually put in this game on that storyline is that depending on who you play, you have two alternate endings. So a lot of games before then, even if you had either one of those ending, it didn't matter who you played, there would be one singular ending.
Yeah.
Normally, and they would have um, a very straightforward. This happened. This person died. This person won. That's it. Yeah. So in this, they have two separate storylines depending on who you played. So in the Allied ending, following the siege of Moscow, an Allied platoon discovers Stalin buried alive in the rubble of the Kremlin. As they begin attempting to remove the debris from the fallen Soviet leader, General Stavros, who's actually the guy that, if you're the Soviet commissions, he's the guy that's giving you all the orders to basically go do this, go on these missions, because he calls you commander, and that's who he is. You're basically underneath him. General Stavros unexpectedly enters the room and stops them. He convinces them that they saw nothing and orders them to leave the premises. Stavros then stuffs a handkerchief into Stalin's mouth before covering his head with a large stone and walking away. This ending leads into the game's expansions and its sequel, Command and Conquer Red Alert 2. Mm-hmm. So if that were to occur, he's basically just stepping into Stalin's spot, which is essentially
exactly
because like it is in most Soviet regimes, or in that Soviet regime, I might not know how well you are familiar with the history of them. It was literally like once one of them started to go down the drain, the leaders started to go down the drain. They all started circling like dogs, waiting for their moment to attack and take over, basically to solidify power. And
Definitely.
It was a lot more cutthroat than people actually understand. So, but. Actually, and so in the Soviet ending, as the Soviets celebrate their victory in the newly captured Buckingham Palace, why of all places they're like, we're going to go to Buckingham Palace?
I don't know. It's a great visual, I guess.
But I guess, they're sitting in the Queen's chair, who knows? But anyway, Stalin...
Well, and why England?
I mean, yeah, it's a great seat of power, for during that time frame, during, the World War II, it had a lot of power, but I guess, it would be really hard to try to do a bigger map, I guess, to have them attack the U.S. at the time.
Maybe. Well, I was just thinking, like, if you're going to pick a spot in Central Europe, go to France or something.
At least go with France,
you could do Paris or Versailles or something. But,
or something bigger, but who knows, that
probably just an English spot fit better with American audiences.
Yeah, probably. So anyways, Stalin commands the commander, which is you, commends the commander, which is you, but is poisoned by Nadia, who in that game, she's kind of like their spy character.
Yeah.
She actually guns him down as the poison overcomes his body. Following Stalin's death, Nadia tells the commander that the Soviet Union is now under the rule of the Brotherhood of Nod, who plan to return to the shadows again and reemerge in the 1990s, leaving the player as a puppet ruler of the USSR. Ready to do the Brotherhood's bidding for the foreseeable future. She is portrayed and shot in the back by Kane, who reveals to Comrade Chairman, us, that he is a true mastermind. So, like you said, you see him in the background the whole time, kind of doing his thing, and you kind of say to yourself, like, what is this guy doing here? What is that?
Yeah.
I don't really get it, but luckily, like at the end there. You really see that they really set it up for the Command and Conquer series and the next Red Alert game that they get into.
Yeah. And that was cool because this was a gaming dynasty. It was big.
Oh, absolutely. But it was just kind of an amazing kind of thing that they had there because they threw all that stuff in there with the subterfuge and the Brotherhood, and they clearly just spell it out. And they're like the Brotherhood of Nod. and you don't see that in a lot of other games that like want to try and do offshoots and things like that. And you kind of think to yourself a little bit like did they have this pre-planned that they wanted to do two different series?
I mean, you have to wonder, because they definitely made two different series of games, and they explore different design space in both of them. So,
I mean, they really do. I mean, one is
I
just.
mean, they definitely laid the groundwork at the end of the game.
Oh
Were
yeah.
they already making them when they did it?
I mean, I don't know. That's the thing is because I mean, there's a significant amount of time between the first game and the second game. So, and I'm trying to remember. I'd have to look into the Command and Conquer series, not just Red Alert series. But there is probably, let's see, 95 and then 2000, which is when the second game came out, and we'll go over that here in a little bit. But that's a significant. That's a 5 year period, and back then these games they were churning them out a lot.
Development times were not like the 5 year type development times we see now. They were
so
year or two tops. They were quick games.
I would think that they probably had this planned out to where they could have put out the next Command and Conquer. I think it was Tiberium Wars. Is that the one?
I think so, or Tiberian Sun or Wars.
I can't remember which one it was. Or Command and Conquer 2. I can't remember what it was called, but I had to look. We could go over that in a whole another episode. But anyway, so this game was so well liked and so well received that obviously it was huge. It got an average rating of about 85% on for most critics, which during that time frame that was pretty good considering as many publications now they have nowadays that review games. Obviously,
well, this is back when the gaming magazine was king. I mean,
oh, absolutely, PC Gamer or Nintendo Power or whatever it was.
I mean, there was lots of web forums and stuff, but there wasn't like these unified Metacritic scores or like someone's Steam score where you can instantly see how much everyone likes it.
On top of it, there was a significant amount of people that weren't on the internet as much as say PC gaming nerds or PC nerds in general.
Well, no, but you
PC enthusiasts even.
Yeah, not even about you, but we played a lot of PC games, but I didn't subscribe to those magazines.
No.
We just saw that things were coming out. They used to advertise a bunch of movies, and then you would just go to the store and buy it.
You would just buy it, but you wouldn't even be able to, you'd have to look it up either off like a magazine or like a television spot or something like that because you wouldn't, at this time, YouTube, I don't even think YouTube existed at this point.
No, that was 2000s, I think, when YouTube.
Yeah, so you couldn't look up a review. You could look up a review online, but you wouldn't be able to look it up on YouTube. And you wouldn't, unless you specifically were looking for Red Alert reviews, it was not as easy to find something like this. You had to look through, like you had to type in the website and then look up through the website to find that particular review. I remember it was a lot harder to do. It wasn't like nowadays where you just go to Google and it's like blah, 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 blah.
Well, and that actually brings to mind something we could do in a future episode. Remember all the different gaming rumors that used to go around? Like, you go to GameFAQs or something, and people would just post up what they, supposed secrets or cheat codes and stuff. And I mean,
that's a great website. I still go to that.
Oh, it's great.
I mean, if you guys
anything like N64 and older is top notch on there still. The new stuff hasn't really translated to GameFAQs as well.
It's hard. I mean, because it's not closed ended, and a lot of what they put on there is just it's Word docs essentially.
Well, yeah, and the newer stuff, if you go like on like the PC Gamer web pages and stuff, they have their own guides, and they're obviously these click-based wikis where it's trying to display as many ads as possible.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This is back when it was just a giant 1 megabyte Word document, which was huge
nowadays
for the time.
Nowadays the things you have to go on to get any kind of information to figure out how to do certain trophies and things I always go to what's called PlayStationTrophies.com is what I go to because I have to go through a checklist, especially depending on what kind of game you're looking for. It's basically just like a checklist to get through because if you're like, I'm going to get that platinum trophy because I really like this game, which doesn't happen very much anymore because I don't have all that much time as much. I'm sure you understand.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And so you're just like, I'm going to try to get as much out of this as quickly as possible. So it's really interesting concept. So also in regards to how well it's sold, you can kind of tell by just the numbers that they posted. So by 97, 1997 that is. They had 2 million copies sold. So that's, if you guys don't understand, if you guys are younger and things like that, if you don't understand this, that is hard copies. There was no like digital sales at this point, so that's a lot of units to move for a small developer.
Well,
like
and in
that.
'95, PCs were not the home fixture they are now.
No.
I mean, it was a significant luxury item to own a PC at the time, and even getting into the late '90s, most people did not have what I'd call a game-ready PC.
No.
They didn't ship with graphics cards, and the chipset stunk.
Well, a lot of nowadays people don't even have really PC-ready games. I mean, you can play some games, like if you want to play something like an MMO with like low-res game, like low-res graphics or something like that. It's doable. Like you can play World of Warcraft pretty much on any kind of game, any PC that you want. It's just gonna have really low graphics probably, because it's just built for accessibility, which is that's the model they are behind. But it just like you said though, they just did not have our PCs were not just made to have that kind of power yet. They were made for.
They were just really taking over the office space, and they were trying to. They were pushing them as a, hey, you can get on the internet, you can do your taxes, you can write documents and letters, and that's the type of space they were kind of getting into.
So if you ever get bored, or if you are ever out in California around the Santa Rosa area, there is an amazing, I'm trying to think of a museum.
Okay.
That I cannot remember what the name of it is, but it is basically like the Computer Technology Museum. It is Intel, I think, no, it's IBM basically operates and owns it, but they basically put it on. They have some of the original, like, data servers and things like that.
Oh, gosh.
It is so cool to watch. And also talking about, like, these giant cables that they use. So, like, these USBs that we have nowadays that can move, like, gigs of, like, data. You can look at it. We're getting super sidetracked here, but these giant cables that are like they're as thick as my arm, my forearm. Which, if you guys don't know, I really work out. So, anyways, no, you're like, yeah, I know. I'm gonna plug myself there. Anyways, so these things are super freaking thick, and they move like maybe like 100K.
I mean, they were slow transfer speeds.
But it's just amazing to see kind of the way we've come. But if you ever get bored, guys, go out there. It's a great place to go and see. My wife actually, that was one of the things, she had it as a surprise for me when we went out there to visit.
Oh, really?
So I had no idea. And she's like, hey, you want to go out to this? And I was like, what the hell is this? You know, like, I was like a kid in a candy shop. Dude. I was just like, what is this? And they're like, I was like, these little kids are like, Mommy, what's this? And I'm like, shut up, kid. Mom, what's that? That's exactly what it was like, man. It was great, though. Anyways, so kind of wrap up the Red Alert 1. So, like I said, it was so well received. It actually won Best Strategy / War Game in '96 by the Spotlight Awards, which is kind of like a predecessor for some Game Awards. Game Awards, wow. So, overall, I mean, I always really have. I have fond memories of Red Alert 2. I have yet to. I mean, I started replaying it a little bit, and I remember playing it on hard because I'm like thinking how bad is this going to be? It definitely, it's a lot more punishing than I remember, which is great.
Yeah.
It's not as forgiving as some of these newer RTS games. You can slip up a little bit, but man, you give them an inch and they take a mile on those things, and it's
Red
just
Alert
amazing.
2 is the best. That was my favorite game, and 3 too. That's where I really got into it.
Oh my god! So we're gonna take a short break, guys, and we'll get back into it. But we will shortly start talking about Red Alert 2, which is the wow! I'm gonna have a brain fart here. Is the successor? That's the word. That's the word I'm looking for. The sequel, to Red Alert 1, and we will get back to it in just a minute. If you're interested in keeping up to date with new episodes on our channel, add us on any of your favorite podcasting apps, or subscribe to our YouTube channel at Seriously Pointless Conversations. If you have questions or concerns, please email us at seriouslypointlessconvo@gmail.com. We appreciate any feedback. Thank you for listening to our show.